Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. We may have a few join us, as we're starting up. My name is Lana Nichols, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. It looks like we have over 30 registered for today's webinar event. If you received my email this morning, I apologize for the wacky formatting. It was fine on my side, but came across all jumbled together. So if you use that to get connected, awesome that you were able to decipher through that formatting issue. But anyway, thank you all for joining us. We do these webinars once a month on various topics. We actually had several request this sort of topic, and Buck Black was gracious enough to donate his time and be able to present this material to you all. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. And but we do various topics once a month for both members and non-members. So for those of you that are on the call that are not a member of Women in Trucking or are not aware of what we are and what we do, I'm just going to take us a little bit about ourselves. Women in Trucking was founded in 2007 by Ellen Boya, who is still currently the president and CEO of Women in Trucking. It was actually established to encourage the employment of women in the trucking industry, as well as promote their accomplishments and minimize obstacles that are faced by women working in the trucking industry. But we have both men and women that are members of Women in Trucking, so you don't just have to be a woman to join. And there are members who are either involved in the industry or have a career interest in being part of the network of professionals that come with being a member of Women in Trucking. So 14 workers are already employed in jobs that support the transportation industry, but the need for drivers and other trucking professionals continue to increase. And so Women in Trucking Association is there to support that endeavor. A few projects that are just kind of recent that we've had going on. We did a Women in Transportation event at the Cleveland Indian game on September 27th, and it was awesome because this year we actually auctioned off the first pitch, and all the proceeds from that went to the Women in Trucking Scholarship Foundation. And FedEx Custom Critical actually won that first pitch auction and gave that opportunity to a driver. So it was really awesome. It was great to support the foundation for scholarships for 2015. So we're really excited about that and want to keep doing it each year. So if you've ever wanted to throw out a first pitch, that would be an opportunity for you. Look for that August, September of next year. Another exciting event that we just did yesterday was Trucks Are for Girls Girl Scout event in Chicago. And Olive Harvey College there in Chicago actually hosted it for us. And we had a capacity at 130 girls and their families register for this event. And they were able to come out and learn about the industry, drive a simulator, check out trucks, and listen to Lenora Hardy with Navistar speak about her career. And it was just really fun. And they were actually able to get a custom Women in Trucking patch that was designed just for this event and the Women in Trucking Association. So really exciting stuff. Those are just two of the many things that we have going on right now. But lastly, I just want to mention that September of 2015, we will be having our first ever conference. So look for information about that coming out as well. So if you're interested in supporting Women in Trucking and our mission, please feel free to reach out to me. Just real quick, my number is 920-737-9490, or you can email me at Lana, L-A-N-A, at womenintrucking.org, and I will send my information in a follow-up email as well. So anyway, this webinar is recorded. I will send a link out to everyone after the webinar that you can access the recording. All the recordings are also placed on our website, so if you wanted to review past webinars that we've had on different topics, you can do that as well. So I will ask you to mute yourself, and please do not place our call on hold. It's very hard for Buck to speak over that playback message from your company. So please do not put us on hold, and also mute yourself. I will attempt to mute you as well, but if that doesn't work for some reason, then please try to only take yourself off mute if you have a question. You can also use the chat feature as well if you have a question, and we'll be opening up at the end for questions and answers as well. So if you don't get your question in, just reserve it for the end, and Buck will address those as well. So I'd like to introduce Buck. Buck Black is a licensed therapist who specializes in helping truckers and their families. They address anger issues, stress, relationship issues, all of the above. Trucker therapy uses phone, Skype, and FaceTime so truckers can actually stay on the road and improve themselves at the same time. Multi-line conference calling is often used when working with couples as well as group Skype sessions. So visits are also available at his Indiana office there in Lafayette. And you can learn more about his services at truckertherapy.com and his face-to-face private practice at buckblack.com. And if you didn't have a chance to jot those down, that's okay. That information is also on the slides, the very last slide as well. So you can refer to those to get his information as well. So thank you, Buck, for taking the time to present this material today. And I'm just going to go ahead and pass it on over to you.
All right. Thank you, Lana. I want everyone to know that the slides are available on my website, so I don't want you to feel like you have to write everything down today. If you go to truckertherapy.com and click on the resource tab, it's the navigation at the bottom of the website under resources. You'll see the slides at the top of the page. All right, so let's talk a little bit about conflict management in the workplace. I think that everyone has a story there, whether it would be on the employee side or the supervisor side. But nonetheless, we'll talk about both sides of it today. So, what causes conflict? There's quite a few things, but if we were to narrow it down to three things, we would talk about the stress that the employees and the supervisors have. That is a huge one. The differences in opinion between the employees and the supervisors, and then also burnout. So those will be the three main things that we'll focus on today. So let's talk a little bit about conflict. When most people hear the word conflict, they instantly think, oh, this is a bad thing. We don't want to have any conflict in our lives. People often identify themselves as being conflict avoidant, or look at that other person, they're always seeking conflict. So anyway, we want to look at conflict as being neither good nor bad. We want to look at it as it's inevitable. So whenever you have at least two people working together, there's going to be some kind of conflict, and we're going to talk about that a little further here in a little bit. We need to remember that conflict does not have to result in winners and losers. Now, I do a lot of couples counseling, and when we have a disagreement or a conflict in couples, so many times we have a winner and we have a loser. So if you can think of in your personal relationships, if you're the person that loses, you're going to feel really bad. So it's the same way in the workplace. So we don't want there to be these winners and losers. Nonetheless, there's going to be times that maybe an employee is, just simply has some behavior problems, some difficulty in that way, and well, we still don't want to look at it as them losing. We want to look at it as, okay, this is a teachable moment. Let's stick with them and help them get through this. All right, so when two people are in conflict, both people believe that their opinion is fact. Usually people aren't in conflict just simply because they're wanting to cause trouble. Of course, the minority of people, this might be the case, but nonetheless, most of the time, the vast majority, both people are very sincere and they truly believe in where they're coming from. Okay, so let's look a little further here at the causes of conflict. So a party is required to engage in an activity that is incongruent with his or her needs or interests. It's kind of an academic way just simply to say that what you feel that you want to do versus what you're told that you want to do or told that you should do are two different things. So you're feeling that you're being pulled in two different directions. That can cause conflict. It might just simply be preferences. So, it's kind of the classic that one employee has the preference of handling this job in this way, the other employee has a preference in handling it another, and then before you know it, there's arguing. And you know what? Maybe both people are correct. So that's something to look out for. And if we look at that one party wants a resource that is in short supply, both parties want that resource. So I think that, whenever I do these talks on conflict, the majority of the time, the resource that is in short supply, usually that's a person's time, it's a person's energy. So when a person feels that they have too much thrown at them, they're being pulled in too many directions, then there's a conflict, especially if you have maybe two supervisors asking one employee for them to do certain tasks. There's only so much that they can do, and then there is conflict as a result. So if we look more specifically at just the practical conflict at work, what do we typically see? So not enough hours in the day. I was just talking about the scarcity of time. That's definitely one of them. A person's opinion is not being heard, and maybe this is a supervisor, maybe this is an employee, but nonetheless, if a person feels that they're discounted, then there's going to be conflict. And when they speak up, that's where you see the conflict. If the person maybe holds it to themselves, keeps it to themselves, then there's still internal conflict, but it's not being expressed. That's just as in danger, or just as dangerous. You might actually lose that employee as a result. Staff members talking about concerns that you don't necessarily agree with, that can definitely cause conflict. Workplace evaluations, I think that's a time that many people dread, because when you're evaluating one another, that can cause a great deal of disagreement about the quality of that evaluation. Complaints in general, it can vary to many different things. So there's plenty of opportunities for conflict at work. And again, it's going to happen. That's what happens when you get groups of people together, and let's try to find a way to get through it. So let's talk about just some guidelines here of how can you resolve conflict. So if you look at this first bullet point, that's pretty much the golden rule, that we want to treat ourselves and our coworkers like we want to be treated. So we all know this, but nonetheless, it's a reminder to everyone that as simple as that is, it's hard to practice that day in and day out. So that's a big one. Another one is communication. And if we look at how people often don't communicate directly, that causes conflict, whether it's in the workplace or it's at home. I would say the majority of the time, people do not communicate clearly, and by talking about themselves as far as saying, I have this concern, this is my feeling, that kind of thing. And when people don't speak out loud about their concerns, then they build resentments, and then they might talk behind the other person's back, all of that kind of thing. So we have to watch out for that. Now, if you notice the last piece of this bullet point here, it talks about, when appropriate, talk in private. Because I'm sure that there's plenty of people that's on this call right now that can think of a time that they were humiliated because their supervisor or another employee called them out on something, and they did it in maybe more of a public forum. They did it in front of someone else, and that really hurt. I know that personally that's happened to me a few times throughout my career, And I remember those times vividly. So nonetheless, make sure that if there is conflict and it's something that might be a little bit sensitive, or the person just has some difficulty taking criticisms possibly, to be able to talk privately to avoid anything like that. All right, so how else can you resolve conflict? Being able to acknowledge the differences in opinion and practice, that's so important. Just like what I talked about in the beginning here, just as far as maybe two employees have a way of handling a situation and they're both right. It's just the preference on how each person deals with it. Remembering that people are going to have their own styles and being respectful of that. And when we become aware of a very different practice style of a partner, we will endeavor to learn the basis for this practice and to help each other to evaluate the efficacy and safety of that particular practice. I think that's just a really nice way of saying that, you know what, we're going to learn from each other, and as long as it's effective and as long as it's safe, let's see if we can incorporate that instead of having maybe a closed-minded viewpoint here. Just can we bring this in? Maybe it will make our organization better or our team better. So I know there's so many times that people will say, especially if you think of like a supervisor that's been around for many years, they will say, okay, this is how you do this particular task. You know, you do step A, you do step B, and you do step C. And then you get a new employee, and then they ask, well, why do you do it that way? And the supervisor often can't answer why we do it that way. The answer is, well, that's just how you do it. That's just how you do it. It's step A, B, and C. So other people can bring new information to the table. And I think it's important to look at that and to accept it when it looks like it might help the team. All right, so let's talk about a few things that we can do to help with some conflict resolution here. So if we look at assertiveness rather than aggressiveness, a lot of times people confuse being assertive and being aggressive. I do a good bit of anger management, and I see this mistake made time and time again. But nonetheless, with I think the average person, when they think of being assertive, they're actually confusing that with aggression. So I'll just explain quickly that if you are assertive with a person, you are expressing your concerns. You're saying, you know, I see this behavior and I don't feel good about it, or I see this behavior that you're doing and it's really helping the team out. So you're putting your feelings out there. You're being assertive. Now, if you're being aggressive towards someone, that's problematic because that means that you're not respecting the other person's feelings. So if you yell at that person, if you raise your voice, if you threaten them, if you have really intimidating body language, that kind of thing, that's on the aggressive side. So we don't want that. And then, of course, being passive, that's on the other end of the spectrum. And being passive would just simply mean that that you let everything go and you don't express any concerns about the problem there in the workplace. So we don't want that either. We do want people to accept the person and not the behavior. So if someone is causing some problems at work, then we don't want to look at them as a bad person. We want to look at them as, okay, well, that particular behavior that they're doing, it isn't working. So if it's from employee to employee, we would go to the supervisor to talk about that, obviously. If you are the supervisor, you would think, okay, now, I really like Jill. She's a very good worker. I have to remember she's a good person. I just don't like that behavior that she's doing. Then you confront her in private and talk with her about what's going on. We want you to be nice to the person that's being difficult. I think that kind of goes along with what we were just talking about. And if you can learn what angers or bothers the person and try to avoid that behavior, that's something that's really helpful. If you're in a small a small company, a small team, and you work with the same people day in and day out, you know what their buttons are. So, take that into consideration when working with other people. So when it's appropriate, we want you to make compromises. That's also something that can be done on a regular basis. Remember, we don't want it to be a win-lose type of situation. It's just okay, how can we get through this? As far as active listening goes, that is more than just simply nodding and when someone is talking and just going, uh-huh. It is making eye contact with the person, like if they're expressing their concern to you, if there's some conflict, and you repeat back some of what they're saying. So you say, okay, so I hear you saying that you are feeling upset about this. I hear you saying that this is a concern. Make sure the two of you are on the same page. We could spend an entire webinar talking about active. Nonetheless, those are the main ideas. So, of course, we want you to determine what the conflict is. The more you talk and the more that you use active listening, the better that's going to help. And hopefully no one will ever become violent, but if that is the case, you would want to distance yourself from that person when you feel that they could become violent. Here in a minute, we'll talk about some tips on how to do that. So what do we not want you to do? We want you to make sure that you're not trying to yell at the other person or, just really show your authority, because if you're going over the top, that's only going to escalate the situation here. So if a person has aggressive body language, we don't want you to match that. So if a person is crossing their arms, flailing their arms, if they are, everyone's seated and then the person stands up, we don't want you to match that type of angry, hostile body language. If you label the person as being immature, bad, or a troublemaker, anything like that, that's going to be problematic. Number one, if you say that to anybody, that's going to create a problem with morale. If that gets back to that person, it's going to hurt them. But even if you only say that in your head, then you're going to treat that person not very kindly, and it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy that person that you are making those judgments about, that they're going to live up to those negative expectations in your head. So I want you to be very careful, even what you think to yourself. Believe it or not, that's really significant. If a person's talking about their concerns and you cut them off, then that's something that can be problematic. They're going to feel discounted, and that's going to make the person even more upset. And if a person appears that they're going to be violent and you have that gut instinct, we want you to trust it, because our gut instinct, that it is so important to trust that. So many times we discount what we feel, but nonetheless, if we see somebody clenching their fists, they're breathing really hard, they're pacing back and forth, we think that there's something, just not right here, that might very well be the case. So in that case, we would want you to call for help. We'd want you to leave the situation. And whatever the protocol would be in your company to go down that chain of events, if it looked like that there was a significant problem that is about to ensue, we'd want you to call 911 and get help. Again, this is quite rare, but nonetheless, it's something that we need to talk about. So as far as de-escalation goes, let's assume that the conflict in the workplace got to such a negative situation here that we feel that we need to help the other person calm down, that we need to de-escalate them. Before you do that, you need to take feelings. So we want you to talk about, okay, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling really angry. It could be one of a million different feelings. By having a little more insight, then you can slow yourself down. You can realize the mistakes that you might make as you approach the person. So when you talk with this person that you're in conflict with, that seems to be maybe on the edge of being out of control, you want to keep a calm voice. Again, if you match their voice or if you try to be intimidating, that's probably going to set the person off. Show relaxed body language. This is kind of hard to describe in a webinar. I usually do this in person and kind of walk around the room and show some different poses. But nonetheless, relaxed body language would be, if you're seated, try to stay leaning back in your chair. Try to show that you're relaxed, even if you're not relaxed at all. Okay. We don't want you crossing your arms. We don't want you to be sitting on the very edge of your chair. Nothing like that. Place yourself by the door. That is so important, so you can get out of the room, and get away from this person if it looks like that they're going to be violent. When this person is angry, we don't want you to take it personally. Okay, because if you start to take it personally, you're going to get upset, and before you know it, you're going to possibly be out of control yourself. Use active listening skills with the person. Now, this would only be if it's appropriate, if it appears that the person, even is able to have a back and forth conversation with you. And of course, if you need to escape the situation and call for help, that would be something to do to protect yourself, protect everyone else. So again, hopefully no one needs to go through a de-escalation, but these are the main points of it. And throughout my career, I've never had to do it necessarily in the workplace, but I have had to do this with clients a couple of times in my office. And usually, if you're able to let the person talk and to show them that you're not going to match their level of anger and so on, usually the person calms down, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about working with employees. So we want you to avoid power struggles with employees. So this is aimed more at supervisors. So if you were to show the employee, I'm the boss and this is how it goes, and then the employee is trying to exert whatever power they have or they want to have, then that's problematic. So we want to try to avoid that as much as possible, and work with the employee instead of work over them. Let the employee have some power. It depends on the workplace as to what that would look like, but we don't want the employee to feel powerless. That would go right along with respecting the employee's free will. Remember how I talked about earlier that there's more than one way to do something at your workplace. So if the employee, as long as they can get their work done and, they're taking everything into consideration and it's not hurting anyone, if they do it a different way than what the norm is, then, let them do that. And they're going to feel that they have a little more power, and employees feel better about that kind of thing. So remember that if you feel like if your employees are feeling forced, this will cause burnout much more quickly. Here in a little bit, we're going to talk more about burnout, so we'll come back to that. And again, just overall, adopting an attitude of working with your employees. That's so important, and I'm sure all of you do that anyhow. Let's talk a little bit about stress. Stress is its own animal, and it contributes to conflict in the workplace. So let's define stress before we get too far into this. There's two types of stress. Eustress is one of the types of stress that we don't really hear about so much. When I talk with people and I ask, okay, what do you think of stress? What do you think when you hear stress? I always hear really negative things, So we'll talk about the negatives here in a second. So trust me on that one. We'll talk about those negatives. But with the eustress, it's healthy stress. It gives you a feeling of fulfillment, of positive feelings. It lets you know that you're gaining things. So if we look at the good things that has come from stress, that would be that you're meeting or you're engaging in a challenge. You're coming in first place in a race. I mean, that's stressful, but it's a good kind of stress. Job promotions, riding a roller coaster, that's all good stress. Like if I personally didn't have any stress, I would be in bed right now. I wouldn't be doing this webinar. There wouldn't have been anything to get me going today. So some stress is a good thing. And I'm sure that all of you can relate to, somebody out there that they don't know, I'm hearing some other people talk in the background. Excuse me. So I'm sure that people listening have heard other people who have no stress in their life, and they need to have a little bit of stress because they don't get out of bed, they don't have enough motivation, that kind of thing. So that would be the example of lack of stress. All right, so distress. So I think that we're all familiar with this, and this is what we often think of when we hear about stress. So distress is when it becomes too much, when it's no longer a motivator. You end up freezing, you're exhausted, you make poor decisions, bad relationships, that kind of thing. So that's something that we really want to be careful with, because when our employees, when our supervisors have this type of stress, then that's where more conflict in the workplace is going to come from. So if we look at the health problems related to these types of stresses, heart problems are really common. A person's going to sleep less, and when a person isn't getting the amount of sleep that they're supposed to get, then they're going to have more stress, so it turns into that vicious cycle. Weight gain would be another one, ulcers, and even higher rates of cancer, believe it or not, because when a person has a lot of distress, their immune system is decreased. So job-specific stresses. I think it's very important to take a look at, in your organization, what are the job-specific stresses and what can be done to decrease that, because everyone's going to be happier. There's going to be less amounts of conflict as a result. So that's just a little bit on stress. Lower the stress, you will lower the conflict. So that is the good news. Let's talk about the last piece here, that what is beyond stress? Burnout is beyond stress. That is something that is more extreme. Stress is something that, a few days off of work, a little bit of a vacation, we can deal with it and we can be okay. But if you get to burnout, the more extreme exhaustion, it turns into diminished interest. We look at the person has lost their sense of accomplishment. They become cynical. And I would imagine that plenty of people listening to this can think of particular people who they have this burnout going on. They're very cynical. They're quick to say negative things. And unfortunately, this can be quite contagious in a workplace. So burnout is something that we really need to deal with. We really need to manage. I really like this quote about burnout, talking about how it represents an erosion in values, dignity, spirit, and will. I think that is just so true. And it talks about how that this turns into a downward spiral. So it just takes one or two people with burnout, and before you know it, you have other people on the bandwagon, bringing your team, bringing your organization down. Let's talk a little bit more about the symptoms here. So how do we know when someone has burnout? We've talked about the exhaustion. Exhaustion is in the extreme case. The person looks tired all the time, maybe coming in late to work, not working at as high of a level as what they're known to perform, that kind of thing. Cynical detachment from work. It is, the person wants to do the bare minimum. They always have a negative comment about everything pretty much, something in that nature. Talking negatively about those you serve. I think that can mean a couple of different things. Like, for instance, people that are in the helping professions, they are there to help, but yet if a person is burning out, they're going to be spending more time criticizing that person other than helping them. But you know what? It applies in the trucking industry too. That, you know, whoever your customers are, whoever you're helping, you instantly think the worst about them, and before you know it, you're nice to them on the phone, you hang up, and then you start saying all these negative things to yourself. You're going to feel even more burned out. It's going to you're going to implode as you throw all this more negative stuff out there, and feeling that you're ineffective. So I show up to work, I do my thing, and nonetheless I feel like I'm not getting anything done. So that is just so important to realize that, you know, if a person feels like that they're not helping whatsoever, that is definitely a big sign of burnout. So, you know, any kind of imbalance with your schedule, you know, working day and night, overworking, that's definitely a significant piece of burnout. Very intense work days. And then, of course, the office and the interagency politics. So, you know, the office politics of the arguing back and forth with one another. That's going to create more burnout. That's going to cause all kinds of problems. So hopefully we have a good understanding of what burnout is. So what do we do about it? That's a whole lot harder, but nonetheless, there are several things that we can do here. So if we look at engagement, that's the opposite of burnout. So we focus on how can we get more energy into the workplace? How can we have people being in a more positive mood? How can we get people more involved in the workplace? You know, is it more team building activities? Is it more lunches together? Is it like a retreat is pretty classic, that kind of thing. So there's different types of involvement, and maybe it's the way that the employees work with their customers. Maybe that would be a different type of involvement, or the way that the employees and the supervisors interact. Again, a different type of involvement. And the efficacy, what we're talking about here, is making a difference. We want the workers to know that they're making a difference. So it could be something as simple as the supervisors sending thank you cards to their employees, and vice versa. It could be that there is a whiteboard in the break room, and you're keeping track of whatever it is. You're keeping track of sales. You're keeping track of, you know, whatever these goals are. And I'm sure that many of you have been in organizations where there's, you know, the employee of the month, the employee of the week, that kind of thing. It's being able to show the difference that people are making. So that's huge. So this slide here about combating burnout is geared more toward the individual. And what can you do as an individual if you feel like that you're having some burnout? How can you help yourself? Number one, I would say this is huge. Don't participate in office gossip. At the end of this presentation, I've got a reference to Dave Ramsey, and he has a book called EntreLeadership, and he talks a lot about how do you build your organization up, and you know, how do you have this positive work environment and deal with conflict and so on. And he says that if he catches someone gossiping in the office, he'll warn you once, and if it happens a second time, no questions asked, he'll fire you. So gossip it is such a cancer to the workplace, and we don't want it to go on. We don't want it to proliferate, because so many times It will just go on and on and on, and before you know it, gossip is everywhere, and that's going to cause people to feel really burnt out, and there's going to be a great deal of conflict. We want people to embrace social groups. The more that you can be social outside of work, the better. The more that you can have interaction with other human beings, and this is on your spare time. That's a fantastic thing to do, because so many people get stuck in the idea of you just simply go to work and then you go home and maybe you have, your family problems or not, and then you go back to work, and that's all it is. So we want people to be social. We want people to do something to break the monotony. Take a mini vacation. If you can take a full-length vacation, that's even better. Nonetheless, we do know that, a lot of people can't afford to take a very long vacation. If you can take a 3 or 4 day vacation, so essentially like a long weekend, add another day or two to the weekend, that's something that if you can do that on a fairly regular basis, if you can do that a few times a year, that can lower your chances of burnout tremendously. And then, of course, if you eat well and you exercise, that's something that's going to help everyone feel better. I know that plenty of people complain about this one, eating well, exercising, I don't want to do that. But if you can just introduce a little bit more fruits and vegetables into your diet, if you can just walk a little bit more, maybe you park further away from work, you park further away from the store, get a little bit more movement into your day, that's going to help. As far as work-life balance goes, that's something else that is so important to counteract burnout and stress. So you leave work at work. I know it's easier said than done, but if you look at literally what can you do here, leave the paperwork behind. Don't bring paperwork home with you, and try to limit your electronic ties to the office. I know it's huge. I know that there's, the majority of the people are responding to emails and calls and so on day and night. So if you can limit that to some degree and say, I'm only going to check my email at these particular times, and you let everyone else know, whatever works in your organization, that's going to be something that helps tremendously. So if we talk more figuratively about leaving work at work, when you get home, we want you to concentrate on the positive things in your life instead of dwelling on anything bad that happened at work. We talked about social groups, social activities, that's important, hobbies. Do something that, when you're at home, that's your own time and you're working on filling yourself up. So, if you look at the law of attraction, what you focus on is what you're going to get. So we want everyone to focus on the positives as much as possible. Let's think about this. I don't want anybody to think about a pink elephant. So right now, whatever you do, don't think about a pink elephant. I can imagine that probably a lot of you are thinking about a pink elephant right now. Because if you are trying to not think about that conflict at work, you're not trying to think about that bad day that you had, you're gonna be thinking about it. So if you can put your focus on something more positive, then that's much easier to focus on. So if I say, well, focus on a green giraffe. So if we take a little bit of time to focus on a green giraffe, we're not going to be thinking about that pink elephant. It's kind of interesting how our minds work. So I want everyone to think about, how they need to focus on what they want, focus on positive things. Here's a couple things that you can tell yourself. Stress is energy, okay? Are you going to use this energy for something productive, or are you going to use it for something destructive? So the next time that you're upset about something, we want you to ask, is this going to matter tomorrow? Is it going to matter next week? Is it going to matter next month? If it is something that is going to matter next week and next month and next year, then yeah, something should be done about it. But the vast majority of the time, we get upset about things that it's not even going to matter tomorrow. So that helps to put things into perspective. And if you can have the attitude that every day is a vacation day, that is ideal. So I know that this isn't necessarily the most practical, but if you can have a picture of the beach or whatever your idea of a vacation is, and even retreat into that for a few minutes, a few times a day, especially, if you have a desk that you can put some kind of vacation picture on, or the ideal vacation, it can actually help even in the short run, and it can help to get you centered. We want people to laugh as much as possible. And even more importantly, if they can laugh at themselves, that is something that's going to help you to get through the day, and it's going to help your colleagues and your supervisors and your employees get through the day. You can even keep a journal of the absurd things that happen. So if you have this journal and you say, "Wow, I can't believe this happened," that's one for the book. We're going to write that down. And if it's something that's really tragic, maybe ask yourself, how can we find the comedy in this? And of course, this isn't going to apply all of the time, but I think most of us say from time to time, this is really bad right now, but you know what? A year from now, we're going to look back at this and we're going to laugh. So that's an attitude to have. As far as the stress reducers go, we've talked about several of them. I just want to remind you of these real quickly. So exercise, there's a lot of research that supports that as a stress reducer. Hobbies, learning better communication skills, that's really important. It's going to reduce the amount of stress between two people. Journaling, writing about whatever, the journal of the absurdities that you have in life, or a journal of accomplishments. The more you sleep, the better that you feel. Of course, connecting with other people, that's going to be really helpful. As far as relaxation, if you're a person that would be into any kind of yoga or meditation, that's often helpful. If you're saying, I don't know if that's me, I don't know if I believe in that, I would say check it out, because it might be something that would actually interest you. And there's all kinds of basic types of yoga that a person can do, and it's not those odd, absurd poses that come to everyone's mind. And at least breathing deeply and doing some muscle relaxation. If you Google deep breathing, muscle relaxation, there's all kinds of techniques that a person can do. I want to point everyone to the interview that I did with Alex Debogorski from Ice Road Truckers. I was able to interview him a while back, and it was an hour-long phone interview. I'm sure that all of you are aware that he is one of the stars of the Ice Road Trucker show that's on the History Channel, and he talks a lot about work-life balance and how to stay positive on the ice road. This guy truly has it figured out. And if you go to my website, truckertherapy.com, at the bottom I've got the hour-long interview on there. And I learned several things from him, and I think that many people can get some good tips from Alex. So, some final thoughts for today. People will make you angry. That is life. There will be conflict. You need to find a way to resolve it, because you can't afford to have the ongoing stress of unresolved conflict, okay? Those are the main things, and we want you to take care of yourself, of course. So, if we look at some resources that are out there, this would be aimed more toward the supervisors, but this is good for employees as well. Dave Ramsey's Entree Leadership. He has a fantastic book. It's also an audio book that he talks about how to handle all kinds of conflict in the workplace. He's also got some free podcasts that are under the Entree Leadership brand. They are fantastic. I highly recommend them. And the Fish book, it is fantastic. It talks about how to have a happier workplace. This is aimed more toward employees, but I think it would be good for supervisors as well. It is a pretty short read, and it's talking about how the people in the Seattle fish market were able to turn a really smelly, boring, maybe even disgusting job into something that was a whole lot of fun, and it brightened the lives of the employees and the customers. So that would be another resource. All right, and if anyone is interested in any other stress management or anger management handouts, at truckertherapy.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, and it's the resources link in the navigation under resources. I've got several handouts as well as the presentation that we just went through. So that's the information that I have for today, and I would definitely be glad to answer any questions if there are any.
Great. So if anyone has any questions, you can just take yourself off mute and ask away. Buck can answer if you want to talk about any specific scenarios that you may be experiencing and maybe how to deal with those. Go ahead and feel free to ask as any of those situations as well.
And don't be shy if there's anything that wasn't necessarily clear. I know it was a lot of information. I'd definitely be glad to answer any questions.
And like Buck said, that he has his information provided here for you. So if you want to take it offline and contact him one-on-one, he would definitely be open to working with you on those situations as well. I do want to mention that our next webinar is on November 18th, same time, 10 Mountain Time, 11 Central. And that topic will be on self-confidence and self-defense. So Debbie Gardner will be presenting that webinar. So look for that information. And like I said, please feel free to reach out to Buck Black on any of the topics that he discussed here today. I want to thank this. I think it's a huge value, and we are really looking forward to this on our website with all the other topics, but it's a unique topic we haven't done before, and we really appreciate Buck taking this to you today.
All right, Lana. Well, thank you so much for having me on, and I wasn't able to hear all of that with the beeping of the conference call, but nonetheless, I appreciate the being invited to talk with everyone today. It's been fantastic.
Great. Thank you, Buck. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Before you take off.